Okay, let's get it started. I think we have people are logging in to the webinar. Welcome to the Sustainable Water Partnership closeout webinar for the pilot activity in the Mara River Basin. First of all, I just want to acknowledge some of the government participants who's going to be in they be joining us as we speak. Ms. Rose Rubesuga, she's from the Ministry of Water of Tanzania. Dr. Ali Matano, the Executive Secretariat of the Lake Victoria Basin Commission, and Mr. David Basuden from the Ministry of Water in Kenya. I would also like to acknowledge our colleagues from USAID in the region, Brian Otiente from USAID Kenya, and Francis Mititu from USAID Tanzania. So a couple of things in terms of how we're going to conduct this webinar. As you could see, you have a questions and a chat box. The webinar will have a Q&A towards the end, but we encourage people to write your questions in the question box. If you have any technical issues in terms of logging in or putting a chat, putting a question, you can use the chat box and communicate with Liz Kendall. Liz Kendall is here to help us in any technical issues. You can send a chat to her if you have any issues. But please put the questions on as we go along, and then we will address those questions at the Q&A discussion. We will also have this, as you could see, there is a raise your hand icon that allows you to raise your hand, and we'll acknowledge you when we get to the Q&A, so we can acknowledge you and open the mic for you. Everybody is on mute, but we can open the mic for you. This is the agenda that we're going to go through today. After some USAID remarks, there's going to be a brief presentation by Gordon Mambo, who is who has been the team leader for the Sustainable Water Mara. Following that presentation, we'll have two panel discussions, one on the project achievements and lessons learned, and the second panel discussion will be on transboundary water governance in the Mara River Basin. And then after that, we'll give some time for some remarks from the government, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So without further ado, I'd like to open the mic to Ali Makaladi, who is our activity manager here from USAID. She's our agreement officer representing from USAID Washington. So Liz, could you give Ali the mic, please?
Hi, Rodolfo. Good morning, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. Can you all see me?
Yes.
I can't see whether my webcam is on.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to give a few opening remarks just to set the context for SWP's work. And again, my name is Ali Makaladi, and I'm a water advisor for USAID in our Washington, DC office. I sit within the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, and I'm the manager on USAID's side for the Sustainable Water Partnership. So as many of you probably know, the Sustainable Water Partnership, or SWP, it's a 5-year project funded from us here in DC, from USAID. And it's designed to help USAID and our partners improve water resources management and elevate water security as a, excuse me, as a really critical development issue. Why? Well, we know that there's really rising demand for food, for agricultural products, for power generation, and that combined with population growth, pollution, and climate change is going to really increase water stress and undermine sustainable access to wash services, food security, nutrition, economic growth, and resilience. And we know that if we don't start to address these issues, some regions across the world and some countries could see their economic growth rates decline by as much as 6% of GDP by 2050. That's a big impact. We also know that if we invest in resilient water resources management, that's one of the most important and cost-effective ways we can address water stress and adapt to climate change. So SWP is one of our responses to that challenge. It's about developing and advancing stakeholder-driven approaches to addressing water insecurity. And it was designed to provide a range of technical services and program implementation, especially to sort of test new ways of improving water resources management within our development programs. And it also advances USAID's global water security thought leadership. So toward that end, as you know, SWP has 2 field implementation pilots, and those were developed in order to test SWP's framework for improving water security. One is the Sustainable Water for the Mara pilot in Kenya and Tanzania, which we're talking about today, and the other, just for interest, is in the Stongchunit Basin in Cambodia. And so that activity has a year left, but it's similar. So the framework that I mentioned that SWP is testing is called the Water Security Improvement Process. And one of its tenets is about elevating the importance of stakeholders and their role in identifying water security risks and then planning, implementing, and learning to increase resilience to those water risks at multiple different levels, from individuals to communities to basins. So SWP has facilitated with stakeholders on water allocation planning and subcatchment management, and that's an important step forward in protecting and rehabilitating basins such as the Mara, and in working towards that goal that people within basins can live with water security now and into the future. I just want to mention that this work that we're going to be hearing about today, it builds upon broader water work that USAID has supported in the East Africa region, both through bilateral, regional, and DC-based programs, and it's in partnership with many other government, community, and donor partners in the area. So we're really eager here at USAID in general and in DC in particular to learn from the experiences of implementing the water security improvement process in the Mara, and towards that end, I'm really looking forward to this discussion as we close out this pilot. So with that, I'll close, and yeah, again, just really excited to hear from all of our partners and implementers on how this has gone and what are some important lessons learned.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you. And by the way, my name is Rodolfo Camacho. I didn't introduce myself. I'm the project director for the Sustainable Water Partnership. Glad to be here today. And just on Ali's points, you're going to hear that a lot on this presentation discussion about the importance of stakeholder engagement at all levels. I think that has been what has made this project and our water security improvement process a good test of in the field, you know, and success and successes coming from that approach. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentations to Gordon, who is going to do a brief presentation of the project achievements and lessons learned. Gordon? Gordon, no, you're on mute, or your mic is mute. Gordon? We cannot hear you. Okay, now we can hear you. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Rodolfo and Ali, for the introduction. I'm going to give a brief of what has happened in the Mara Basin. I think that photograph in front of you now was taken at Kirumi Bridge. This is the point at which the Mara River leaves the Mara wetlands as it gets into Lake Victoria, which is its final destination. Next slide, please. Could I have the next? Yes. The sustainable water for the Mara, there was a scoping study that was done and identified a few challenges that was facing the river Mara Basin. So when we came on board, we subjected these findings that were put together during the design of the project to stakeholders, and basically they confirmed the same. So many challenges at the Mara Basin, which are really high demand for water, especially with the change in land use, because you find in many places rangelands are now being turned into agricultural land. And with rainfall vulnerability, the demand for water is high. The other challenge that was also facing the basin is, despite attempts by the governments of Kenya and Tanzania to put into place a community association to support the management of water resource in terms of water resources users associations in Kenya and water users associations in Tanzania, there's still lack of capacity, and these groups lack the adequate tools to be able to effectively support the government's management of the resource. And there's, as I've mentioned above, the land use change is actually causing a lot of demand on water, particularly in the context of Kenya, with a devolved government after the 2010 constitution. Many people that were in the cities actually have retreated back into the counties, especially in the county of Narok and the county of Bomet. And these users are now, there's a lot of competition on the use of water for domestic use and those who want to use it for productive purposes. So in the design of the project and looking at the challenges that were facing the river basin, SWP Mara set out to look into ways of means in which people can access adequate quantities and quality of water in a sustainable manner without destroying this ecosystem, and in support to people's livelihoods. These were the main things. The project was a duration of 3 years, started actually in February 2018 to December 2021. And we had a budget allocation of 3.5 million. During the implementation, we worked with a lot of partners. Lake Victoria Basin Commission was our host, and we were based in Kisumu, and a lot of guidance came from them in how to move forward. On the Tanzania side, we worked very closely with the Lake Victoria Basin Water Board, who are really the body responsible for water resources management at the Mara on the Tanzania side. Working closely also the Water Resources Authority in Kenya, WWF, both in Kenya and Tanzania. We had even a memorandum of understanding with WWF in Kenya and Tanzania, and we had joint plans and implementation projects. Worked very closely with the NELSAP, who are supported by GIZ, and I've had a long history in working the Mara Basin, and the experience was also important to us. As we continued with the implementation, some partners also became critical. Tanzania Forest Services, Kenya Forest Services, SIDO, which is Small Industries Development Organization in Tanzania. We also linked with other USAID funded projects, especially Atlas, that we had to bring in to support us in assessing climate vulnerability and how it was affecting the people in the Mara Basin. And that really guided us when we were making a decision on what kind of intervention we should undertake. We had a lot of lesson learning and experience sharing with Waridi, which is also a USAID funded project and works in Rufiji in Tanzania. Next slide, please. That is basically the map of the Mara River Basin. For those who are not familiar with it, a lot of information on the map is there, but it's basically the river starts from Napuipui Spring in the Mau escarpments, Maru Forest, and the two main tributaries are the Nyanguris and the Amala, which join at a place called Kabison in Bomet to start the Mara River. Other tributaries also join it. We have Talek that also joins it, and the other tributaries that you can read on the map. Next. Yeah, we come to approach on how implementation of activities took place. We were majorly guided by the tools that had been developed by USAID, by SWP, Sustainable Water Partnership, the tools that help in water security, developing resilience. And we subjected this to a discussion of stakeholders. You can see a photo at the bottom was taken during a stakeholder strategic planning workshop that we held in Arusha just before implementation. And all the issues and the challenges were put to stakeholders who went through them and set priorities and basically confirmed the issues that were raised during the scoping study as the major challenges. I think the main emphasis was really impact on the ground. After the Arusha meeting, we also went down to validate this with grassroots people in the counties of Narok and Bomet, and basically communities at this level, also in the Mara North and Mara South in Tanzania, basically confirmed that the issues that were identified by the strategic workshop in Arusha were really the main issues affecting the basin. Armed with these tools, we went now into the design of intervention and constantly discussed with the community whether what we were planning were the real issues and the chances that we had in terms of tackling the challenges in the Mara Basin. And this led us to implement some of activities that I will briefly highlight their achievements. In the next slide, please. Yeah, one thing I think we needed a better understanding on the river health and how the communities understood their river. And we got an opportunity that before we started our intervention, particularly on the Kenyan side, two water resources users association had developed subcatchment management plan in Nyangores and in Talek. So we reviewed these documents and gave us a lot of insight on the challenges that were really facing the river and what kind of intervention could be put in place. These are live documents that are still going to support these water resources users in terms of managing water resources and what actions they need to take to ensure that there's a sustainable flow of water in the river system. A similar activity was also done in Tanzania. Our sister project that was called Prepared had done a lot of studies, especially in the Mara wetlands, and it came up with a strategic action plan. We looked at this and reviewed it and validated with communities in Mara North and Mara South, and there were confirmation that those challenges were still valid. Next slide. Yeah, what area of intervention that was identified both at community level and even the strategic workshop in Arusha was really access to water for domestic use by communities who live along the river basin. These were not really doing conservation to the water resources, at the same time easing pressure from communities in terms of walking in the river to get water. And one thing that we also discovered is the springs really help, especially during the drought, in recharging the rivers. Any excess flow of water gets into the river system and it really helps in supporting the river during the dry periods. So you can see before you, there was a before and after, both in Kenya and in Tanzania. Let me see the next slide where we depict some of the actions in Tanzania. Yeah, those are actions in Tanzania where on your left, you can see there was a well that had ran into disuse and was rehabilitated, and on your right, there was a borehole at a dispensary. This particular dispensary has now been graded into a health center, and we worked closely with the community Lake Victoria Basin Water Board, and it has now been upgraded to a solar system that now serves about 4,000 people. Through these interventions, we were able to protect 6 springs in Kenya and 3 springs in Tanzania and 2 wells rehabilitated in Tanzania. In total, we have enabled access to 21,000 people, both in Kenya and Tanzania. And out of the 21,000, 8,000, 100% meets the WAS standards of 30 minutes round trip to collect safe water. Next slide, please. Yeah, the other area of intervention was the area of conservation. During community meetings, we discovered that there was a lot of deforestation in the Mara Basin, both from Kenya and Tanzania. And most of the indigenous trees had disappeared. So we agreed that one intervention that we should do is to do planting of indigenous trees. But this came with problems. Seedlings for indigenous trees could not be found. So we worked with the water resources users to establish indigenous tree nurseries to be used for reforestation in the Mara Basin. These are trees that are water friendly, and they were there initially, but because of demand of livelihood, people had fallen them off to either for firewood or for burning charcoal for livelihood. So we have worked together. We've established 4 tree nurseries, 2 in Kenya, in Nyangores and in Talek, and in Tanzania also in Mara North and in Mara South, where we worked with the communities. They sourced their own seeds for planting. And the photo you see in front of you is a tree nursery in Mara South, where they have been able to propagate over 34,000 seedlings, which will be ready for planting. And the target for planting is really during the World Water Week. I was recently in Tanzania, and Lake Victoria Basin Water Board is working very closely with them to ensure that these 34,000 seedlings are planted along the basin to enhance reforestation. Next, please. Yes, the other area that we discussed and agree upon, okay, we are going into serious reforestation. How do we ensure that the trees that are planted today will be there tomorrow? And one area that we agreed with the communities was the area of beekeeping. And we worked very closely with some institutions that were already doing beekeeping, and reaffirmed that really beekeeping was instrumental in terms of ensuring forests are there, and also providing livelihood to communities in terms of honey harvesting. And so we did training on beekeeping and established what we call demonstration or learning centers, apiaries in Kenya and Tanzania, where people can learn. So if I briefly go through the photos, the photo on the extreme left is where honey has been harvested and is being processed, packed, and then sent to the market for selling. And the photo in the middle actually shows the kind of beehives that are now used. And on the extreme right are the beehives that are currently under manufacture by the water resources users and water users associations, not just for themselves, but also in promoting beekeeping in the areas where they work. Actually, there were very interesting stories around beekeeping, and most of the indigenous people told us that if they wanted to conserve a tree, especially medicinal trees, they would put a beehive on it and people would not fell it down. This is the area where we've worked very closely with the Maasai beekeepers in initiative who are doing beekeeping and doing marketing, and will continue to work with the water resources users in Talek and Nyangores to continue promoting the beekeeping and running it as a business. On the Tanzania side, we worked with Tanzania Forest Services, who are already doing that particular business in beekeeping to enhance or sustain their forests. Next slide, please. Yeah, now we go into the area where we worked very closely with the ministries of water in Tanzania to develop what we call water allocation plan. It was through our discussions, and we found that really people needed to understand the river in terms of what resource is available, who is using it, what are the variabilities during the dry and the wet seasons. So we went into the development of water allocation plan. When you were starting this in Tanzania, there was no guidelines. So the first thing we did was to develop a guideline for water allocation planning process. The guideline is what you now see on your left, and this, we are happy, this has now been approved and accepted by the Minister of Water in Tanzania, and will be used as a national document in supporting not only the Mara Basin, but other basins in developing water allocation plans. On your right is the water allocation plan of the Lower Mara Basin in Tanzania, which is now complete and has been approved. We are just looking forward to having it launched sometimes next month. And so this, at the time we were starting, there had been some efforts in Kenya to develop a water allocation plan on the upper part of the Mara. Maybe that process is not complete yet, but we wanted to bring the lower part of the basin to the same level. So there exists a water allocation guideline that can be used as a national document, thanks to the Minister of Water in Tanzania who have approved it, and the water allocation plan for the Mara Basin on the Tanzanian side. Next slide. We've also produced a lot of documentation, especially on studies, and many of them, this happened during the water allocation planning process, where we looked at the abstraction, understanding how many people are abstracting water in the basin. We looked at the resource availability, we looked at the environment flow, and so many studies, WIP modeling, that also helped us in developing the water allocation plan, in looking at the scenarios, what happens during drought, what happens during the wet, what do we do when we have plenty, and what do we do when we have less. And these documents are available for those who are interested in looking at them. It has been quite a learning process, and the task force, just to mention that we were more of a facilitator, because in the development of the water allocation plan, we had a discussion with the Minister of Water in Tanzania, and they elected a task force that was led by our consultants from IIT and Stockholm Environment Institute in the developing of the water allocation plan. So from day one, this document belonged to the government of Tanzania, because it's the technical teams that were doing it. And there was a lot of learning process in the production of these documents, which I think is still going to be instrumental to the Minister of Water in Tanzania, should they want to develop other water allocation plans. The resources available, they can easily tap from the task force that were engaged with us. Next slide. And if I'm sure many of us are familiar with the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed between Kenya and Tanzania on 15 September 2015. The ultimate aspiration of this Memorandum of Understanding is for Kenya and Tanzania to have a cooperative agreement framework that can guide the management and utilization of the Mara River. So working with our partners, we facilitated the production of a discussion paper on transboundary water sharing principles. We brought in experts with international experience from WWF and other institutions, IIT, and we sat together for several days, I think, and developed this discussion paper, which needs to be discussed by technical teams from Kenya and Tanzania for them to set a way forward on how to move towards the development of a cooperative agreement framework. Due to COVID disruptions, we've not had a chance to bring the teams together to discuss this paper, but it's an important paper that would help in terms of setting the way forward on how to move with the transboundary water management in the Mara Basin. Next slide. Thank you. I think I'll be taking questions during the Q&A, and if you have any particular question, please put them down and we'll attempt to respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordon, and for this presentation. And a reminder to everyone, please type any questions that you have in the question box. Again, at the Q&A towards the end of this webinar, we're going to also open the floor and go through some of those questions, but also people who raise their hands will give the mic. Anyway, we're gonna move to the first panel discussion, and it's gonna be moderated by Basil Mahayani. Please take it over, Basil.
Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. It's great to be with you all, and thank you for attending our webinar. As Rodolfo mentioned, my name is Basil Mahayani. I'm the Deputy Director of the Sustainable Water Partnership, and I am moderating this panel to discuss some of the achievements and, more importantly, the lessons learned of our pilot activity in the Mara River Basin, and really thinking about the sort of the impacts of the process of the water security improvement process as sort of a framework for thinking about and working towards water security improvement goals. As a reminder, as Gordon also mentioned, we'll have an opportunity to discuss any questions during the Q&A session at the end of the panel. Before I introduce the panelists, I first want to make a quick acknowledgement to Anne Malawa and Megan Doherty. They're often behind the scenes, and they were very much responsible for making sure that all of the gears were able to operate smoothly. As you can tell, this is a very lean team covering a very large geography, and so I want to thank them and acknowledge their hard work and contributions over the last 3 years. Our panelists this morning include project staff from Kenya and Tanzania. I don't believe this was mentioned in the presentation, but our main office was at the Lake Victoria Basin Commission headquarters in Kisumu, and then one of our staff was in Musoma, Tanzania, working with the Lake Victoria Basin Water Board. And the panelists were very much responsible and very much involved in the design and implementation of some of our key assessments and implementation activities. So without further ado, the first panelist, Gordon Mumbo, who just presented, was team leader of the MARA activity. Claire Howley, who is a water resources management specialist and was the Tanzania coordinator in Musoma. Polycarp Ngoje, who is our stakeholder engagement specialist, was based in Kisumu. Also joining us are Dr. Annette Huber-Lee. She's a senior scientist with the Stockholm Environment Institute, and also Dr. Michael McLean, who's a professor of ecohydrology at the IHE Delft Institute for Water and Education. The first question is directed towards Polycarp, Claire, and Gordon, and maybe Polycarp, you can kick us off. As noted in Gordon's presentation, SWP worked with a variety of stakeholders, including transboundary institutions like the Lake Victoria Basin Commission, national and regional institutions like the Ministries of Water, the Water Resources Authority in Kenya, and the Lake Victoria Basin Water Board in Tanzania. Also RUWASA, the new Rural Water and Sanitation Agency in Tanzania, and community-based organizations like the Water User Associations in Tanzania and the Water Resources User Associations in Kenya, to implement a number of the key interventions that Gordon described in the presentation. And we, as a project, as a pilot activity, Gordon noted that it started off with a number of assessments and stakeholder engagement to inform some of the key activities in the direction of the pilot over the course of the 3 years. And in reflecting on the last 3 years, what do you believe were some of the key elements that helped enable the success of SWP's activity in the MARA? Polycarp?
Thank you, Basil. Hello, everyone. Polycarp Ngoje is my name. As Basil has mentioned, been in charge of stakeholder engagement based in Kenya, but support across Kenya and Tanzania. As you just mentioned, I think if you look at the overview of what Gordon had just presented and the results that we've achieved and what we've done, I think from the onset, way back in February 2018, when we started off the projects, that we were involved a lot in terms of ensuring that we engage in inclusive planning of the activity that we were involved in, and bringing together over 50 stakeholders drawn from Kenya, Tanzania, and the Mara River Basin. We more or less gave them a blank check, so that we only thought about 4 thematic areas, and we gave them an opportunity to tell us what are the practical, doable things that can address some of the challenges that they're facing in the Mara River Basin. And within that kind of discussion, demystify some of the thinking that people have, that a lot of scientific studies have been done in the Mara River Basin, but these scientific studies are not converted into practical, doable things. And to giving them that opportunity and trying to guide this kind of discussions within the framework of some of the scientific studies that have been done, gave us a lot of buy-in, so that they felt that they owned some of the priority activities that they came up with. So that gave us a very good opportunity to assure them that what we are implementing for the Sustainable Water Partnership, the MARA activity, was basically addressing the practical thing that they came up with. So I think that was a very good starting point for us. And I think most of the stakeholders were drawn from the government agencies, private sector, even include the community people. And I think that report is what made the framework of what we're trying to plan. Number 2, when we are starting the implementation, we ensure that actively we decided to involve different stakeholders that have been working on the ground, both in Kenya and Tanzania. Rather than working in silos, we're keen to look at how could they jointly work with the people who are involved in the key activity they're doing on the ground. So rather than trying to start new activities, we are looking at how we could build synergy together with the different people who are working. And I think that's part of the reason why we had very good working relationship with WWF in the Mara for a very long time. We were able to come up together with a joint work plan so that we could agree on what are the kind of activities that we could think about how we do together as a team. And number three, if you look at the way we are working, we were very keen to ensure that everything we are doing, we worked very closely with the government, the relevant ministries, so that the activities they're doing was in line with the priorities of the government. And that's part of the reason why, as Gordon had mentioned, getting into structured dialogue, we could only guide the process rather than prescribing what needs to be done. And if you look at it in terms of some of the achievement we had in the water allocation plan for Tanzania, like through the task force, it was very easy for them to basically agree that this is the project that we need to take, and this is the priorities. And we were able to basically achieve some of the things that we thought could not be done within a span of 3 years that we are talking about. Coming back to the alternative livelihoods, some of the priorities that
Did we lose Polycarp?
Some of these kind of activities in terms of what they needed to do within that period that were there. So I think that's those kind of joint planning and active involvement in the stakeholders and making sure that we work closely with the government agency gave us a very good point in terms of how we could achieve some of the success that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Polycarp. Claire, I mean, what are some the key elements that stand out for you as you reflect on the last 3 years, and if there's anything that you'd like to build on from Polycarp? You're muted.
I think the muting probably is done from a central place. I don't know.
No, she's muted herself, so I can't. Oh, there she is.
Yep.
Still we can't hear her.
Yeah, still can't hear you. Okay, maybe you can work with Liz. We can try and troubleshoot you and get you on. In the meantime, I'll come to Gordon. I mean, in terms of thinking about the last 3 years and you know, particularly about sort of the importance of stakeholder engagement in this water security improvement process. What for you are some critical aspects that enabled the success of some of the activities?
Thank you, Basil. I think the stakeholders engagement helped us build the trust, because we are tackling a very sensitive topic of water resources, and engaging stakeholders and letting them set the direction where the project was going to go gave us the opportunity to build trust, and people believe that whatever you are doing was their own initiative, and we were just there basically to facilitate the process. The other outstanding element for me in terms of stakeholders engagement and good linkages with partners at field level, when COVID came in, I don't think we could have implemented activities, but because of the positive and good linkages we had with our stakeholders and partners, we were still able to continue with activities because we had already enhanced ownership, and all the stakeholders saw that all interventions that were being facilitated by us were really their own. And we constantly emphasized that we were really outsiders. They were the insiders who understood it better than ourselves. And we also cultivated the belief that that particular I like this statement, the river belongs to the people. That river belongs to them, and any interventions to sustain it and make it reliable was really based on them. I think these are the outstanding issues that I saw. But the most critical part is the ability that we had to engaging stakeholders and build trust among ourselves and themselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon. Yeah, it's a really interesting and important point. I mean, I think one of the things that is emphasized in the water security improvement process is the importance of facilitation and facilitation to understand some of those risks and being able to prioritize among them in collaboration with the communities and the stakeholders who are involved in the process. Claire, I want to see if you are able to get back on, if your mic is working or not yet. Still nothing. Okay. We'll continue troubleshooting. I have a quick follow-up question. Maybe I'll come back to Polycarp. The water user associations were a very important partner in our pilot activity. We worked with 4 of them, 2 in Kenya and 2 in Tanzania, the Niangoras and Talik Ruas, and then the Mara North and Mara South Wuas. Can you elaborate about, why it was important to work so centrally with these water user associations in the water security improvement efforts? And what are some lessons learned for you that stand out in sort of successful collaboration with them?
Thank you, Basil. I think for the period that, if you look at people who you say that if you really want the boots on the ground, then you really have to look at the people who have been there with the river. And Gordon is saying the river belongs to the people. The belonging points start with the Water Use Association and Water Resource Use Association. These are the people who basically are in the ground, and they are the ones who feel the pains when the river is not taken care of. So taking them on board in terms of what we're doing and ensuring that we developed the sub-catchment management plans, we were able to basically articulate or address some of the challenges that they're facing by addressing some of the plans that they needed to come up with. And through that process, we were able to prioritize some of the activities that they felt were basically going to help them ensure that they implement some of these activities. One, they were able to prioritize issues about alternative livelihood, which is about beekeeping, which is a commercial lady, to look at what could they really do as a people to look at how to address the environmental issues. And on top of that, we mentioned, you realize that we established some of the tree nurseries, because all along they've been saying that we really want to take care of the river, but where do you get the indigenous trees? So all this time they never had that. And I think engaging them gave us an opportunity to look at the scientific studies and translate it into practical, actual things that they could basically relate to on the ground. And that gave them an opportunity to appreciate scientific studies, because if you facilitate and you just realize the shells and papers that have been put somewhere, but if you come down and talk to them and tell them, these scientific studies have also prioritized some of these activities I talked about, I think there's been a lot of ownership. And as a result of that, through the beekeeping, we're able to basically ensure that we set up for them the honey collection centers, and also looking at how they can commercialize some of this beekeeping. And they've committed that about 10% of the income they're getting from the beekeeping and the tree nursery, they're going to basically plow it back to conservation. And that is a commitment that they put together, and they were able to sign it so that this can be monitored by the Water Resource Authority in Kenya and the Lake Victoria Basin Water Board, both in Tanzania. So that ensures that there is element of sustainability, and ensuring that they can retain some of the money, so that continuously they don't need to wait for the donor money to come in, but they can put aside some resources to ensure that they continuously keep on taking care of the environment. I think as a result of that, we've got about a lot of support, and they've contributed immensely in terms of even resources. Like when you were setting up the nurseries, they contributed an aspect of the land space. They were able to bring in the material to basically set up the nursery. So it was not fully financed by us, but they put in some resources. That ensures that there is element of ownership, and will ensure there is sustainability in some of these activities going forward.
Thanks. Claire? I don't, it might be my audio. I don't know if, can others hear her?
No. Maybe
Oh, sorry
probably
about
she
Okay,
should check her audio settings.
okay. Well, you know, we'll continue moving on just for time concerns. You know, Polycarp, you make a really good point there about you know, the beekeeping and a lot of the intention of it, you know, in addition sort of towards sort of environmentally friendly livelihoods for some of these communities. It, you know, there is a sort of an understanding of the value chain and the market opportunities for the water user associations in Kenya and Tanzania to generate sort of own source revenues to help them fund their, you know, future catchment conservation efforts and the facilitation of some of those commitments between the water user associations and the Forest Service and the Water Resources Authority and the Basin Water Boards going forward, I think was a really critical element. And for those on the panel, I will note that we have a number of learning documents, case studies that we will be releasing here in the next few weeks that describe the work that we did in some of these initiatives in more detail. And of course, if you have any questions, please follow up. Claire, I'm going to give you one last opportunity if your microphone's working. Otherwise, I'm going to pivot to the next question.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So yeah, if very quickly, sort of some of the factors that enabled the success of Mara's, our activity interventions in the Mara.
Yeah, thank you, and sorry for the inconvenience. I think one of the major factors that help us to succeed and to be able to achieve all that we've been able to is the fact that we were able to adapt real quick. For example, when we started and when we did the stakeholders analysis, we did not have any idea that we'd be working with TFS or CEDO. And in our planning, we were not going to work with these two institutions. But later on, when we started to implement, we felt that these two institutions would be very important for us to succeed. And almost immediately, we started to reach out to them, and they got on board. And to date, they've been quite very useful in terms of us achieving establishment of the tree nursery in Tanzania, but also the beekeeping. As you can see, one of the tree nursery in Tanzania, one in Mara South, is doing quite very well. And I think soon they will be able to sell. They have been able to propagate around 30,000 of seedlings, which has been quite a good effort of collaboration with TFS, but also in terms of beekeeping, CEDO have been quite useful. CEDO is doing a lot of work towards helping small-scale enterprises in Tanzania, and they've been quite supportive to support the water users in Tanzania. And overall, working closely with the government, as Polycarp and Gordon has mentioned, we've been working very close with the Basin, but also the Water User Association, but also WWF has been working in the Mara for long time. It was quite a good experience to work with them, but also to benefit from their knowledge and experience. And I can say that this have been quite useful, and this organization made it possible for us to achieve.
Great, thank you, Claire. I want to shift gears a little bit and open up the floor to Annette and Michael to discuss a little bit about the water allocation plan for the Lower Mara Basin, which was what I think one of the highlight achievements of the Mara activity. And this was with the collaboration with the Lake Victoria Basin Water Board. I have a three-part question for both of you. You know, what factors enabled the successful development of the Lower Mara Basin Water Allocation Plan, and why is a water allocation plan considered critical for water resources management? The second is, you know, one of the key risk factors in the Mara Basin is the increased intensity and frequency of extreme climate events, and how are these factored into water allocation planning both now and in the future? And then the third is, you know, what lessons are there for replicating the WAP development process when human and financial resources might be constrained, sort of in similar contexts? Michael, maybe we begin with you, and then we'll turn to Annette.
Oh, thanks very much. It's just so impressive to hear all that's been accomplished in the project. We at IHE, we were involved in one specific area, the development of the water allocation plan. And we were also involved in very technical aspects of that work. You heard us earlier referred to as consultants from IHE. We are that. We're bringing in our technical expertise, but we've also been partners in the MARA for around 15 years now, working through multiple projects with lots of different development partners as well as local implementation partners. And so that also means that I've got quite a bit of experience of working and struggling to make progress such as this in the MARA. Let me refer first, Basil, to your question about why the WAP. Water is critical and fundamental to the future development of the Mara River Basin and the communities living there and the industry and the like. Water is central to that. Water is limited in the Mara. It's spatially and temporally unavailable. So this water allocation plan, for the first time, really allowed the Ministry of Water to quantify how much water is available, to quantify where that water is in the basin and how it varies through time. So now the ministry understands how much water there is, but also because of the work that was done looking at what are the water requirements for the environment. The Mara is, of course, known so well to many of us because it's an extraordinary ecosystem. And it's an extraordinary ecosystem that's also of enormous value to the two countries. So this work, following the guidelines of Tanzania, this work also enabled the ministry to determine what are the limits of abstraction, what are the limits of water use for other purposes in order to preserve that ecosystem foundation. So the basin water authorities, the communities and the like are in a much better position of knowledge now of how to progress in the development of the basin, the use of water resources in a sustainable fashion. And if I just say, for me, one of the critical elements of the success of this was the willingness of the Ministry of Water and the Lake Victoria Basin Water Board to become full partners in this process. It's so common that consultants will come in and just provide technical expertise in the form of reports and the like, work very independently often, but in this case, at every step in the process, when we were out in the field collecting data for the water abstraction surveys, for the quantification of water availability, for the determination of the water requirements for the environment, technicians from the Ministry of Water were there with us, right? So they were part of the collection of the data. They struggled with the interpretation of those data. And they also, as Gordon referred to, they took a leadership role in writing this document, right? So they wrote the water allocation plan, applying the guidelines that had been developed now to be applied nationally, and ensuring that this is in compliance with and aligned with all laws and regulations inside of the country. So it's beautifully embedded. It's embedded in that respect. And the knowledge, the ownership, as Gordon also referred to, of this document by the authorities is 100%.
Thank you. Annette, I'd like to invite you sort of to weigh in. And I know you've done a lot of thinking through your work in the MARA and beyond around the impact of climate change and thinking about the importance of scenario planning. So would you like to reflect on some of those points and some of the other questions as well?
Sure, thank you. And may I just start by saying what a privilege it has been for me personally to be part of this really amazing project. And similar to Michael and IHE, the Stockholm Environment Institute's role was largely quantitative, as you were suggesting, Basil, doing scenario planning, using our tool, WEEP, and bringing stakeholders on board. But I think what was, I have to say from the outset, what was extraordinary to me in this project, and for this I have to give Polycarp, Claire, and Gordon credit was a stakeholder engagement for me that was at a whole nother level. It wasn't just people showing up at a workshop to get their per diems. The people that came to these workshops really wanted to learn, were open to new ideas, new tools, new ways of thinking. That was exceptional in my experience globally, honestly. And I think that was really what made a difference in terms of the buy-in for the entire water allocation planning process, learning about the role of scenario plannings, and understanding that we live in a highly uncertain world. And this year has proven it beyond a shadow of a doubt. I mean, none of us predicted the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's an understatement.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what was helpful in thinking about climate change, which I think the people on the ground in the Mara live and breathe more than many of us, understand that climate is changing both now and it's going to become increasingly uncertain going into the future. And the beauty of the water allocation planning is that it's not just a one-off document, but it's something that gets revisited over and over again. So looking out in the future, what are things that we could do now that are resilient given the uncertainty around a drier climate or a wetter climate? And I think some of the on-the-ground activities that were implemented, the beekeeping, planting trees, protecting springs, all fit into robust immediate strategies that we'll no regret about regardless of how the environment plays out. So I think in terms of the ability to take the water allocation planning to other parts, other places, I think the project has already motivated that in the case of Tanzania, where the country is looking at taking what we've learned in the Mara elsewhere in the country. I think having the Lake Victoria Basin Commission on board and their potential ability to replicate this planning process in other parts of the Lake Victoria Basin area, I think there's a high potential for taking the lessons, the ideas, the concepts elsewhere in Africa and beyond.
Annette, I have a quick follow-up question. I mean, one of the themes that has clearly emerged in these the two discussions that we've had is the importance of stakeholder engagement. And you mentioned at the onset of your remarks that SCI was very much involved sort of in a quantitative role for the water allocation process, but a lot of the scenario planning was very stakeholder driven. And I wonder if you could offer just some quick remarks about the importance of involving stakeholders in that process.
Yeah, the stakeholder engagement is critical in my mind. It goes into, the ownership is critical. Like if we want a water allocation plan that has buy-in, you need the stakeholders engaged from the very start. Where are these quantitative numbers coming from? So we spent quite a bit of time actually showing where did we get the data? How are these data entered? How do these data factor into the planning process? But then also equally important is, as we look to the future, what do you care about as a stakeholder? What would you like to see accomplished? What mechanisms, what strategies, what infrastructure could we envision to help us get from here to there, given the uncertainties? So I would say the meaning of these quantitative tools really is derived from the stakeholder engagement part of the process. So I feel like that was really essential.
Thank you, Annette and Michael. I want to note that we've been working with Annette on documenting some of those lessons learned in the sort of the robust decision-making process and scenario planning process, and a case study as well that we hope to be releasing here in the next few weeks. Any final remarks from any of the panelists before I hand it back to Rodolfo? Well, I want to thank you all for what I thought was a very vibrant and interesting discussion. You know, I think it's really clear that we were able to do some incredible things within this pilot and sort of really sort of test and learn from you know, the possibilities that can be derived from the water security improvement process. So with that, we'll call time on this panel, and I'll hand it back over to Rodolfo. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Basil, and we're back on time on the agenda. And for all of you in attendance, the panel will be, the previous panel will be ready to take any questions when we get to the Q&A. So, but again, if you have any questions that you don't want to be typing, use the question box, and we'll address those questions to you. Or when you raise your hand at the Q&A, then we can also call you on for the question. I'm going to move into this panel, which I'm going to moderate, and this is with regards to transboundary water governance, some of the lessons learned and what has worked well. And for this panel, I have Gordon again and Michael McLean, who was in the previous panel. But in addition to that, I have Juan Carlos Sanchez from GIZ and William Owagam from WWF, which all of these have been instrumental partners, and they have also a big history in the MARA, so they kind of speak to a lot of these transboundary water governance issues. So I'm gonna ask a general question, and I'm gonna that I think in relation to this panel is, you know, we know that these countries have signed this MOU in 2015 for a joint water resources management of the Transboundary Mara River Basin. And we have seen over the last 5 years, including the work from SWP, the multiple institutions and donors have contributed to transboundary governance discussions and work. So what I want to ask you is, in your own experience, can you describe what had worked well, and or share any lessons learned, not only from this project but from other projects too in the MARA that we could take on in terms of advancing the transboundary water governance in the MARA River Basin. So let me start with Michael, and maybe if you want to say a few words, and then we'll follow up with the other panelists.
Oh, thanks for calling on me first, because I did want to sort of lay a little bit of groundwork for this, because honestly, I feel like there is no better place in all of East Africa to achieve true transboundary cooperation and management of water resources than in the Mara River Basin. And the reason for that is, number one, the enabling conditions. The two countries have very similar legal structures and laws and institutional setups for managing water. So there's consistency there. On each side of the basin, you can see who your partner is, who your counterpart is on the other side. That's fundamental. Also, in the work that's been done to date, the two sides of the basin have taken a common approach. The methodologies used in quantifying the resource and quantifying the demand and the like have also been very consistent. So they're comparable, and they can also be brought together and harmonized. And in fact, the two countries are using a common database for what's available in terms of water resources. And also those limits that I described are very similar between the two. And also what we saw in the execution of this project over the past few years is extraordinary cooperation by the basin authorities on the two sides, because in our work on the Tanzanian side, Kenyan authorities were invited to participate in that work as well. In one way, to share their own experiences from going through this themselves. And in fact, they had previously invited Tanzanian authorities to see what was happening on the Kenyan side. But when we were in the field and when we were in key workshops and technical workshops, the Kenyan authorities were also invited so that they could observe. There was a transparency in the process that was going on, and there was also a lot of lessons shared. And then finally, the common importance of this basin and the similarity of the importance of this basin to the two countries. And that is that, for each of them, this basin houses their most valuable conservation area. Serengeti National Park on the Tanzanian side, Masai Mara National Reserve on the Kenyan side. So there's a similar sort of motivation and set of priorities on the two sides of the country. That's led to the progress that's already been made with the Memorandum of Understanding in Joint Water Resources Management. And also, all of these opportunities have been attracting partners such as USAID, such as GIZ. WWF has been committed for so many years to this basin because of seeing that opportunity. So let me just tell you, if it's not here, I don't know where it's going to be, where we're really going to see an example of successful transboundary water allocation planning, but also water resources management. And yeah, now the principles of sharing are on the table, and we're really ready to take that next step. I'll stop there, Rodolfo, to allow others.
Thank you, Michael. And I think you raised a good point. Without these partnerships for us, we won't be able to be where we are right now. So I think it's one of those partnerships that is not necessarily driven by very sophisticated MOUs and so on, but sometimes we have, in our experience, we have gotten into the field, and then we pretty much call each other and figure out how can we participate together in a given discussion or in a given event in the Mara. So that has been very productive. And with that said, I would like to give William from WWF the floor, so he can tell us a little bit how these partnerships have worked in terms of advancing the transboundary water conversation. William, are you there?
Thank you, and a great opportunity really to be on this call and just share some of the lessons of what has happened in the Mara. We've been in the Maras, many speakers have alluded to already, for quite a while. And what I want to share is bordering on what McLean has alluded to. It's really not about an MOU, but really the two people in the two sub-basins, both in Kenya and Tanzania, appreciating the importance of the Mara, that we need really to work together in order to safeguard the Mara. As of now, we pride over the Mara. Look at downstream, the Mara Game Reserve, Amboseli, not Amboseli, but Serengeti National Park. All this depend on a free-flowing Mara. And that is amazing. If it were elsewhere, you'll find that we'd have we'll have dams and things like those, but up to now we still have a free-flowing Mara. So people appreciating that importance, and therefore ensuring that you bring everybody together. It took a while to build those structures, bottom-up structures, both in Kenya and Tanzania. You talked about the UAs in Tanzania and RUAs in Kenya. And then pushing, ensuring that there's inclusivity. One thing that when the team on SWP was presenting, one thing probably that many listeners didn't pay attention to is inclusivity. So ensuring that even women are part of the discussions, and I think that was very, very powerful. So that inclusivity, ensuring that there is cross-sector action on the Mara, and that is something that going forward, I think we can learn from and even strengthen management of other transboundary water bodies. Recognition of entities, for instance, like Victoria Basin Commission, and ensuring that they're aware of what is really going on. So it was not just about the MOU that Kenya has with the Tanzania, but agreeing that we want to annually remind ourselves. That is, I'm talking about the 15th December, annual Mara celebrations under the umbrella of Lake Victoria Basin Commission. We're reminding ourselves on how important the Mara is and calling for each one of us to take responsibility. We also, we had a team that readily shared, were ready to share information. So if you look at SWP and the work that they've done in the Mara, they were ready to listen and ready to build on previous investments. So not, duplicating efforts, but building on what has been done. And I think that was really, really important. So sharing information, learning from past experiences, and building on that. And I think that has made us get to where we are today. And appreciating the importance of government. So for instance, in Kenya, we have Narok as well as Bomet government, ensuring that there's that buy-in, and also downstream, the district governments brought on board to ensure that all of us can rally behind a collective action on the Mara. So those are some of the lessons that I think enable us to get where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, William. I think an important and very revealing work has been the work of environmental flows, and this is something that it has been important for the Mara, given that both environmental flows and water for basic human needs are an important policy decisions by the governments to make sure that water in the river is maintained at levels that are allowed for those two important priority functions. And I just wanted to ask, as an important transboundary element, the environmental flows, I want to ask Juan Carlos of Sanchez from GIZ, who has participated in GIZ has participated in this type of work over the last few years. So this is views about how this plays in the transboundary water discussions. Juan Carlos.
Yes, thank you, Rodolfo, for having us, for having GIZ, also in representation of NELSAP, with whom we have been working on in tandem for the past couple of years. And thank you all colleagues for this very important panel. There's a couple of things that I think are important when we think of the success factors for good governance in the Mara. Rodolfo, you mentioned very well that the science-based approach through the flows, and I'm going to refer to that one very soon. But I wanted also to recognize the importance of the enabling environment in the Mara River Basin, which goes upwards. If you consider that Mara is also part of the Lake Victoria and even of the broader Nile Basin, and also downwards when you think of the strong national legal frameworks that are in place and that are one of the success factors for what we see now as a true success story in the Mara. In that sense, I think the importance of those strong basin-wide institutions and the leadership that they have played, it's really critical, and it's something that we have to take note as we move forward and try to understand if there's also possibilities of emulating and replicating this success in other contexts, right? So to be more concrete, you have the Nile Basin Initiative, but we also have the Lake Victoria Basin Commission, which both have played pivotal roles. And instead of colliding, they have been working together, also making sure that that political will is trickles down also to the national level. So you see really effective multi-level governance working in place. And I think that's one of the things that have actually contributed to that success, that enabling environment through legal and institutional frameworks that actually work. It's not always the case, but here it was actually working and working quite well. The second one is the science-based approach that you were referring to, right? This idea of having allocation of a transboundary resource based on science and not based on political considerations or other elements that might make that process much more complicated. So following this fully science-based approach, based on the e-flows assessment and the methodology that was initially set up by the Nile Basin Initiative, and then followed up by the Tanzanian government and by the Kenyan government, also made it quite possible to first address the needs of the local populations and those basic water drinking requirements for people, and also for a very critical user, which is the ecosystem and nature itself. So once that you manage to address those very important key users, then you could also, based on science and based on the existing methodologies, then move towards to allocating the remaining water resources for economic and social purposes, but making sure that we moved taking care of those most vulnerable sectors that are obviously local populations and ecosystems themselves. I think a lot has been said also about the partnership itself, but I think that was one of the key issues, that the partnership was at the service of the countries, and this was a process led by the two countries. So I think the ownership element, I'm not going to dwell into that one because it has been already discussed in extensively, but I think it's important to recognize it. And the last one, I think we need to also recognize that the MARA has that transboundary element at all levels, in a way, very present. You have it from very simple things like the water flowing from one side of the border to the other one, or even wildlife flowing from one border to the other one, or even the way in which people interact and the cultures interact among themselves. So I think that element of being one single ecosystem, I think it's what the governance systems have tried to emulate, and the governance systems have tried to adapt to that one single ecosystem that it's the MARA. And of course, we know very well that ecosystems, they don't understand anything about political boundaries. So I think in this case, the natural boundaries have been very well understood by the social systems, in this case, the governance mechanisms. So that relates again to the enabling environment that governs the MARA. Thank you so much, Rodolfo.
Okay, thank you, Juan Carlos. And I think that's important, and I think the science-based decision making here is important, and you need this technical side. We need to understand how much water we have and at what times of the year, I think, and what is needed for the environment. So I think that's an important aspect of this transboundary water governance. But I like to turn a little bit back to the, we have said a lot about stakeholders and partnerships and so on. But I would like to ask Gordon your perspective, and we in this program we work with the ministries of at the national level. We work with the regional governments, in Kenya, and the county governments. We work with the Basin Water Board, the water, and the water resources authorities, and also the water user association. So can you explain a little bit our work, or how that work was instrumental in terms of engaging the different groups at different levels of the government and across the two countries, Gordon?
Thank you very much, Rodolfo, for that. I think our work was really instrumental, and the first step was there was an MOU that existed and had been signed between Kenya and Tanzania in terms of cooperation on the management of the water resources of the Mara River Basin. This MOU was not very much known, so the dissemination of this MOU and bringing it to an understanding to all people really helped. And the fact that we're operating from the Lake Victoria Basin Commission really helped us in people accepting who we were. and putting emphasis that Lake Victoria Basin Commission put at all stages that this was their effort in terms of supporting the implementation of the MOU, gave us good reception at all levels of the government. So we had quite a lot of political support in all the places that we worked in. But the most important thing that stood out is really the ability that our small team had, and we realized that we could not be able to operate alone. We needed the partners already on the ground and the people with experience of doing things on the Mara. So we adopted the situation where we were great listeners and listened to the people so much. And as I mentioned, I think that helped in building trust between us and partners and even the government officers that we were working with. And our work actually gave them ability to get a better understanding on what the river situation was and how it could be improved. I must say that whatever we've done in the Mara Basin has set up a momentum on how other river basins, transboundary river basins, could be managed. And the MOU is a good step. You know, I have experience. I worked in the Nile Basin for many years, but comparing what we did in the Mara, I think it would be better to start small and grow. If the Nile Basin had multiple MOUs on transboundary river basins, and then bring them together to start negotiating the bigger one, it would work better. So what we've done really in the Mara Basin has set a momentum, and this is an opportunity for Lake Victoria Basin Commission and other partners who are still operating in the Mara to carry forward the initiatives that, or scale up whatever we've done there. This, my experience actually going recently into Tanzania, I think the feeling people have is probably we are leaving too early. But I emphasize that this was a pilot, and the pilot normally sets lessons, and these lessons can be taken forward by anybody, not necessarily the person who facilitated the lesson learning. What also helped us much is what Michael said in terms of similarities between the populations along the Mara River Basin, both in Kenya and in Tanzania. And above all is the protocol that established the Lake Victoria Basin Commission, which means any lessons that have been gathered here can easily be carried out in other river basins within the Lake Victoria zone. And this is very clear on the protocol. I think one area that I would also mention is at the end of the day, the decisions on transboundary river corporations, the decisions are made by politicians. And going down to talk to them, I think we did quite a bit of this in Tanzania, bringing the district commissioners together. The regional commissioner for the Mara became our friend and officiated in most of our workshops. And this actually gave us, even people at community level were now saying, oh, the regional commissioner is talking about it. The district commissioner is part of it. So we should really be collaborating with this team of SWP. So I was happy that you really don't need a big army. You can have a small army and still do the work. I had a very small army, but this small army was able to penetrate deep into most areas of the Mara Basin. I think the water resources users and the water users associations are critical in terms of managing the river basin. There were challenges in terms of getting river flows because some of the gauging stations are in places where you cannot reach during either drought or during flood. But these are people who could be used to help support that process. And even if early warning system had to be set, the water resources users and the water users association would be instrumental in terms of information dissemination. We were disrupted by COVID because we had established a platform where users from Tanzania and users from Kenya was to come together and agree on their protocol and operation procedures, how they could be informing one another. This is one area that we see is critical in terms of people informing each other on the changes that are taking place, and even in monitoring the environmental flow, because one thought was maybe to put a system where it could inform the users when there's wet season or low season, and they would easily communicate this to the others. So in conclusion, I think our work has set a momentum, and we've demonstrated some models how a transboundary river basin could be managed to get a better understanding in developing water allocation planning. And the water allocation planning process, we made it very participatory, that it's understood even at grassroots level.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. And I think you raised an important issue. I think in addition to that, discussions at the transboundary level, we have the Mara Day, which is celebrated every year, where the two countries come together at all levels of government and users of water, and that I think is an important one. So in the essence of time, I'm just going to move to the next part of the webinar, and I'm going to ask if there's going to be some remarks from the government, and before we go to the Q&A. And I'm going to call Dr. Matano, that I see you are there first on the list. Dr. Matano, who is the Executive Secretary of the Lake Victoria Basin Commission. Could you please say some words if you have anything to say? Let me unmute you or somebody. I cannot do it.
Liz could help you.
Liz, can you help unmute?
Working on it.
Okay. For whatever reason, I cannot do it.
He's unmuted on my end.
Oh, Dr. Matano, are you there?
I've requested that he unmute himself.
Okay. Well, we can come back to him, but also I don't know if David Bosuben from the Ministry of Water has some words. David, can you? I cannot. He may appears to be in, but not. Yeah, I don't see him on.
I just got Dr. Matano unmuted, so let me see if he can speak.
Okay, I can see it. Dr. Matano, can you hear us? No, it appears that he is muted again. Okay, let's see. I'm going to move to the Q&A question, and we'll let him, if he appears, then we'll let him bring his remarks, or anyone from the government, from Ministry of Water in Kenya or Tanzania. I don't see Rose yet in the. Anyway, let's move to the Q&A while we get Dr. Matano or the Ministry of Water in Kenya to speak. So with that, I'm just opening the floor for question and answer to anyone in the panels. You just need to raise your hand, and we can unmute you. Is anybody raising their hand? If nobody raised their hand, well, I'm going to ask a question then. When we get more questions. So, and if this for any one of the panelists to talk, I mean, we see that the Mara system is a ecosystem, and they share these the important national parks, and there's benefit for the two countries. So I wonder if you have anything to say about, I think these transboundary discussions are important because there is some benefits, this benefit sharing, what we call among the two countries. What one country does affects the other one, and vice versa. So I just wanted to see if anybody from the panel has any points to discuss around this, the benefit to the region as we better manage the water resources in the Mara. Anybody?
Rodolfo,
Yes.
I could say a few words about that.
Okay, go ahead, Annette.
Yeah, I think the benefits for both countries in terms of cooperation around water is important right now, but I think it's going to become increasingly important as we see some of the impacts of climate change play out. Even the uncertainty around rainfall is huge as we go out 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But even just taking the temperature change, which we're fairly certain about, is going to have impacts on agricultural production, on ecosystem resilience. So I think the need for, and the Mara region is heavily dependent on both ecosystem health, agricultural production, domestic access to water, and industrial use of water as well. So the more that the two countries can coordinate, the greater the resilience of the entire system. So I think it's really critical that the two countries are able to come together and see the benefits of collaboratively planning for the basin.
Okay, thank you. I know that there are apparently some questions are coming that I'm not seeing, but I'm just going to read a couple questions and see who can answer them. There's a question that regards with what methodologies do you use to attain and access stakeholder needs feedback, group individual interviews, or something more quantitative? If anybody has anything to say about that? Perhaps Basil, you want to say something about our assessment in terms of the stakeholder capacity building?
Yeah, maybe I could say something.
Yeah, I'll defer to Gordon and Polycarp and Claire on some of the assessments, and then also some of the workshops that were held with the stakeholders.
I think some of the tools that we used were basically the stakeholders mapping and analysis. And we were lucky that we did not spend a lot of resources doing this because our partner WWF already had done a stakeholders mapping within the basin, both in Kenya and Tanzania. So what we did was to sit down and do that analysis, and that gave us an opportunity to categorize our stakeholders and how to approach them, what kind of information a particular group of stakeholders would need, and how are they engaged in the Mara Basin. And actually that led us. There's one particular stakeholders that we found was very critical through the mapping and the analysis process. And these are the hoteliers, especially the tourist hotels that operate in the Mara Basin. The critical role, their business really depends on the River Mara flowing. If the River Mara stopped flowing, there will be no business there, although they have been disrupted by COVID of late, but this is a temporary cloud passing. So the stakeholder mapping, the analysis, using those kinds of tools really helped us. And also in some places we even did during the planning process, we used tools like Transect to walk that took us along the river and passing through where communities live. And this one also gave us some feedback process. I would, maybe Polycarp could also chime in here.
Thank you, Gordon. Like you mentioned, that stakeholder engagement has been a cross-cutting process that from the onset, as you mentioned, from the joint work planning to ensuring implementation of our own activities has been actually the stakeholder engagement has been cross-cutting all through. But I think of critical aspect as what Gordon has said, that the onset of what we did was we did a rapid partnership appraisal so that you could know who is working in which sectors. And that gave us an opportunity to invite the over 50 people who actually we had a workshop with in January 2018 we were starting. And through that process, when you are now cascading down to the district level and the county level, then you could even get even more people who we know that they were doing a number of activities on the ground, and we were able to basically look at what are the shared value, what are the common interests that we're having together, whether it's developing interests or business interests, and we could try to basically structure the partnership along those kind of level of interests, so that it's not a question of them coming as a CSR or just support it, but they must have some interest in terms of what we're doing. And that gave us an opportunity to leverage their own involvement, technology, aspect of creating their own time in terms of what we're doing. But up and above that, we also developed a number of tools that we were using to make sure that we got a lot of feedback from the stakeholders. We did a baseline information about the number of stakeholders. We had institutional capacity assessment that we undertook. And with that gave us a clear view in terms of what are the gaps and what could we basically do with these kind of stakeholders. And that we did with a number of them, including the water users and the Water Resource Users Association. And at the same time, we had an opportunity to establish some of the spring committees that we were able to basically take an assessment. So we did the baseline, we did a lot of capacity building, and after that, we had an opportunity to basically do post-implementation assessment. And there was significant improvement. I think if you look at the scores that we had with them in a focus group discussion, there was significant improvement in terms of addressing some of the issues that we raised during the baseline aspect in terms of what we're doing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Polycarp. Let me give the word to Ali. Ali, you have a question, and somebody can unmute Ali.
Sure, I think I can unmute myself.
Okay, okay. Yeah,
really
go
well.
ahead. Go ahead.
But yeah, I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that point, any of you on the panel, but just knowing that the water security improvement process and the work that SWP and its partners were facilitating tries to work at a bunch of different scales on water security, from the subcatchment and community scale on up to the transboundary level. I was just wondering if folks could say a little bit more about your impressions of how that really intensive engagement with stakeholders at the smaller scales feeds up into action at the basin and transboundary scales, and whether that's you see that as an important part of generating buy-in for those larger basin scale efforts, or if it's rather just important for water security writ large.
Anyone in the panel?
Yeah, let me just the question you are looking at. How does the engagement cascade from the community level all the way to transboundary? Well, just to circle back in terms of what we mentioned at the onset when we were starting the project way back in February 2018, we had about over 58 people in the room when we were doing the strategic action planning. And the 58 people we were talking about were drawn from the community level all the way to regional organizations. And that gave us a good starting point so that we could get all the views of all these stakeholders that were drawn from the community. The community was represented all the way to regional organizations. And that kind of feedback in terms of what we had, because essentially what we were doing is basically had structural dialogue so that you could get their views, they present, and we captured that. And that gave us an opportunity to look at how we could basically engage them at a different level. And as I mentioned, out of that meeting, we were able to basically to start cascading down at the district level in Tanzania. Then we cascaded down to the county level in Kenya, and we gone down up to the Water Users Association. If you look at some of the planning that are involved in, even a forest association, like we had Tanzania Forest Services, we had Kenya Forest Services. These are people who have organizations that are at the community level, and every time we are involved in developing some of the activities, they were part and parcel of the process so that we could get their views and address some of them. And part of the reason why if you look at the rules, we have to make sure that we review the sub-catchment management plan. And the sub-catchment management plans basically look at what can they do at the community level. And these are basically facilitate the process so that whatever is contained in those sub-catchment plans are actually the views of the community. And this was basically superimposed with basically what we had at the action plan, at the strategic action planning level. And that gave us an opportunity basically to ensure that we could link what is at the regional level coming down up to the community. Another thing is that if you look at between Kenya and Tanzania, as we mentioned, already the MOU was signed, and there's been a lot of effort that have been going on to ensure that some of these activities are implemented or some of these institutions work. So what we did is basically we align ourselves in that aspect and wake up those kind of discussion and look at what we could do based on the mandate of the project that we have.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
If I may jump in really quickly. Yeah, Ali, I'd like to respond to your question thinking on two different, thinking on sort of this vertical scale and then also thinking through time. I think the project did a very good job of engaging stakeholders and partners from the very local level, even up to the transboundary level and national level, of course. And that was critical because at each level, those partners have different sets of responsibilities. They have responsibilities that work to achieve the common objectives at that scale. And I think by engaging partners at each of those scales and ensuring that we were supporting and facilitating them and their ability to carry out their responsibilities at that scale, it built this bridge, this continuity from fine scale up to national scale that helped move the whole force forward. Yeah. And I've got to take the opportunity to say something about the temporal scale and the commitment of the partners here, because we're here today to reflect upon the accomplishments of this USAID funded program over the past 3 years. And, you know, there was even a remark about, oh my goodness, you know, the time is already up on this project. And we know the reality of projects and programs is that they have a 3-year, maximum 5-year cycle period. But I just want us all to remember that USAID has been active in the Mara for more than 15 years, continually, and probably much longer than that. I mean, I've personally been involved and supporting in some way USAID supported activities with lots of partners for 16 years. And there have been 5 clear programs during that time that are all somehow interrelated, from working up in the forest to laying out some of this very early water resource management activities and supporting on so many different levels the actors that are required to accomplish the goals that we're setting out for ourselves. So that sustained commitment, even if it is through these repeated 3-year cycles, is critical. And USAID is just one, you know, of many partners that have been committed to this and working together for many years. And I don't expect that's going to change in the future as well. And it's going to be critical because this stuff is tough. You know, it's really difficult to achieve some of the objectives that the ministries and the countries and now the counties have set for themselves. So these long-term commitments of working together are essential for that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Let's move to another question here. I have a question from Natalie Richard from GSD. She's concerned about the indigenous trees, the follow-up. As you know, when you have nurseries and you plant trees, survival rates, you know, is a percentage. But she's asking how we are gonna, who's gonna follow up on this, and I'm just gonna partially answer this question, but I'm gonna leave the panelists, anyone to answer this. I think we have a partner, the Tanzania Forest Service, both in Tanzania and in Kenya too, as partners, and they are gonna be overseeing this activity. But I just wanna see if anybody has to say anything else to say in terms of the follow-up on the indigenous trees planting.
Yeah, maybe if I say something, I think we realized that was going to be a challenge. So in Kenya, we looped in Kenya Forest Services and Water Resources Authority in Kenya to work closely with the water resources users associations who have established the tree nurseries. So the extension services from Kenya Forest Services will support that process. And Water Resources Authority, who is more the custodian of all the resources in Kenya, and works closely with the Water Resources Users Association is looped in to continually monitor and working closely with the Forest Services support this process. It's the same thing that we've done in Tanzania, that we've worked with Tanzania Forest Services or Forest Agency that are providing extension services and support to the tree nurseries that have been established by the Water Users Associations in Mara North and Mara South. And Lake Victoria Basin Water Board, who is responsible for the resource management, is looked in. So the three parties have come together and signed some operational action plans on how frequently they would come together to visit the tree nurseries and what kind of support these people would need in the future. And I think this was critical for us because, well, organizations like ourselves could work and live, but the government extension services will continue. And this is why we had to work in closely with the Forest Services Associations, the Water Resources Authority in Kenya, and Lake Victoria Basin Water Board in Tanzania. So we are hopeful that through that process, there will be continuity in that activity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Basil, you wanted to expand a little bit on Ali's questions? Basil?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, yeah, I'm not muted. Thanks, Rodolfo and Ali for that question. Building on the Polycarp and Michael's comments, particularly around sort of the vertical scale, I think this is especially a challenge in a basin as expansive as the Mara, especially working in two country contexts. And as sort of a non-field-based participant and observer, one of the things that really stood out for me is that a lot of the water security challenges for the communities were highly local. Whereas, the Basin Water Board and the Lake Victoria Basin Commission are looking at these sort of across, broader geographies. And so the challenge is to try and draw those linkages from, highly localized problems and trying to identify solutions, such as spring protection and working with the water user associations around, tree nurseries into sort of more regional planning and management initiatives. And I think one really good example of this was a part of the water allocation plan. We had to kick off with a number of really critical assessments, and one of them that was mentioned earlier was a water abstraction survey. And using this innovative tool, the MWater platform, we worked with the Basin Water Board and the water user associations and some other stakeholders to go out and survey the water users within the lower Mara Basin. And we were able to obtain, I think, a really important understanding for how water users were using water within the basin. The Basin Water Board was able to identify new water users, and as a result was able to strengthen its own permitting process by issuing new permits and renewing permits that had expired. And that data was then able to help inform critical elements of the water allocation plan, understanding how much water is being drawn. And coming back to the water security improvement process, I think this is one of the challenges of water resources management in particular, is connecting that sort of highly localized experience, particularly for many communities, to sort of upstream downstream dynamics and challenges. And I think the water security improvement process, particularly through that stakeholder element and thinking across in vertical scales, but also as Michael noted, temporal scales, it provides a framework for being able to work through these challenges in ways that attempt to be systematic. I think one of the things that stands out in the Mara activity is that it's not a clean process. It's a very challenging and it's a very iterative process, and it requires a lot of processing of new information and new challenges. And to plug another SWP resource, we've produced toolkits that illustrate and elaborate the water security improvement process, and it was, I think, in one of the graphics in the earlier presentation. And one of the things that we're doing right now is updating those systematically drawing on lessons learned and examples from the pilot activities in the Mara Basin and in the Stangchinit watershed. So, and these will, we'll start rolling these out as well in the coming few months. Thanks, Rodolfo.
Thank you, Basil.
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe if I could just,
go ahead,
Gordon.
Gordon, go ahead.
In terms of decision making, really, the vertical relationship is critical, because at the grassroots levels, you work with the water users and the water resources users. But there are issues that hinge on bylaws, and they need the powers from above them. And in terms of decision making, the people at district level, regional level, and even at ministry level really want to have a feeling on how this would impact on the people at the grassroots. And if the people of the grassroots are already aware of that, it makes it more easy for them to arrive at a particular decision. I was interacting at different levels during the implementation of this project up to the ministerial level. And every time I discussed an issue with the ministry or the regional administrations in Tanzania, they first referred to the people at the grassroots before they could arrive at any decisions. So that vertical, horizontal engagement is critical, especially when it comes areas of decision making on watershed management, on the river basin management, because the bylaws need to be enforced and the water users need support from people above them. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Gordon. Since we have 7 minutes left, I just wanted to see one more time if any of our colleagues from the government, David Bosuven is still on, and I don't know if he wants to comment on something. Just let me know, raise your hand, and I will open the mic. Okay, here we go. Can we unmute him?
I think Dr. Matano also wanted to speak, but he has problems that we can't hear him while he's able to hear us.
I don't see him in the chat anymore, in the attendees. But,
I've made him a panelist, and he's unmuted, but I think he's having.
Okay. How about David?
Audio.
David raising his. Can you unmute David? He has his.
Yes.
He has his hand up.
He is self-muted, so he has to unmute himself.
Okay, David, can you unmute yourself? Yeah, I don't. Oops, he just jumped off.
I just made him a panelist.
Okay, so let's see if he.
He is still self-muted.
And Dr. Matano?
Dr. Matano, are you there? He may have been having problems with his mic.
Okay.
Sorry, but we'll see if any one of those, if they come on board online, then we'll take on his remark. Any remarks? We have also our colleagues from USAID, Francis and Brian, if they want to comment on something. Raise your hand, and then we'll give you the mic.
As we wait for anybody to come in, I think one thing that has worked for the Mara, I really just wanted to reiterate that. It took a while to ensure that there's shared vision right from the local level, that is from the community level, up to key players, different sectors, whether it's private sector that Gordon talked about, and other stakeholders within the basin. And that is really what has enabled the work to be relatively easier. There's that buy-in, and therefore people taking up responsibilities. The Mara challenges are quite immense, and the need for that shared vision becomes very, very important, because you want all these people to take up certain roles so that you have that inclusive water management from the top, the policymakers, and down to the communities who are undertaking interventions at the local level. So that shared vision is taken quite a while, but I think it's getting there. And that also guided the work that we've been partnering with SWP. So we have that common interest, shared vision, and therefore synergizing for greater impact. If other players could, take this as an example, then we can really enhance water security, not just in Kenya, but also in the region. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Brian is still with his hand up. Can we unmute him, or he has mic problems? Brian Motiente from USAID Kenya. Brian, are you there? I don't see him. And
I've sent a request for him to unmute himself.
yeah, now I see David is unmuted too.
Brian, you should be able to speak now.
Okay, Brian.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll be very brief, just to convey first and foremost New Year greetings, but most importantly, congratulations to the SWP project team and partners for the work that you have consistently put in terms of delivering the results that have been shared and discussed this afternoon. So having said that, we look forward to making sure that these results not only remain as results that can be discussed in webinars, but we'll be able to make some transformative changes in terms of how water security within the Mara River Basin is managed going forward, based on the various challenges that we keep facing. So I'm happy that the guidelines for the water allocation plan, as well as the water allocation plan for the lower Mara River, at least that has come to fruition. And we do hope that our partners in Tanzania will be able to utilize this going forward. So other than that, we look forward to further engagements. And I also just want to possibly thank the participation and the collaboration that we have had since inception. It would have been good to hear a word from LVBC, as well as the bilateral partners that share this basin. But I think that has been challenged by some technological issues. So other than that, all the best, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Let's see if we can mute Matano. Dr. Matano, are you there? For whatever reason, still muted. Maybe some problems with his mic.
I've been chatting with him on WhatsApp, and he says he can hear us, but he can't. When he speaks, nobody hears him.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, but he appears muted in our. Okay,
Oh,
Dr. Matano, I can see him. I can hear him.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Dr. Matano.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome. We
Thank
got a
you
few
so
minutes. We're
much.
gonna go a little bit over time, but that's okay. Let's hear your views.
Okay,
Go ahead.
thank you. So thank you so much, Camacho and the team. Indeed, I think the discussion has been very useful. I have been with you throughout, but unfortunately, you could not hear what I was saying. I'm equally going to be very brief because I know time has gone. But basically, let me also take this opportunity to congratulate the Sustainable Water Partnership for Mara for work well done. And of course, a lot of discussions have been made, and I'll take maybe 1 or 2 minutes just to maybe highlight 1 or 2 things or 3 things that I think this particular initiative has succeeded. And of course, one of them is the fact that we do have an existing Memorandum of Understanding, and creating a conducive environment for any regional initiative is very, very important. And as many of you have alluded, this Memorandum of Understanding came out of necessity between the 2 countries because of the challenges that we are facing in management of the Mara River Basin, or Mara specifically. And that's why the 2 countries had to sit down. It was indeed a very long process. It's not as probably short as one would think, but it involved a lot of discussion between the 2 countries. And One of the reasons why it succeeded, of course, was because there was a convener. The fact that the Lake Victoria Basin is able to mobilize and call the 2 partner states is very critical. It has also been very critical in this process of implementing Sustainable Water Partnership project, because as Gordon would attest, we did convene all the meetings between the 2 countries. So we are playing a facilitative role, and basically that is our mandate. And I think to a greater extent, that could also have facilitated this particular initiative. It has also been mentioned that dialogue at community level is very, very important, and making sure that the community appreciate the importance of managing that ecosystem as one. And to a greater extent, I think the Mara Day that has been alluded is also very important. Remember that the Mara Day was actually even there before the MOU was signed. And therefore, there were already initiatives to ensure that that ecosystem is managed together. Of course, the involvement of the Water Users Association and the River Users Association was very critical. And again, also previously, through other programs that were funded by USAID, we had come up even with a Transboundary user forum, bringing the 2 together so that they can actually be able to dialogue. And I cannot agree more with Professor McLean that indeed that ecosystem is conducive for transboundary or joint management of that ecosystem. What we needed were structures, and of course, we also have an advantage, the fact that Mara River falls within a regional economic community, that is the East African community. So discussion can go as high as up to the presidential level. So if there are issues to be lifted, for example, the good lessons that we have learned from this project through the Lake Victoria Basin Commission's Council of Ministers, through the Council of Ministers, and even up to the summit level, this can actually be upscaled up to that level. So the conducive, the environment is very conducive for us ensuring that this succeed. A challenge has also been thrown to us as Lake Victoria Basin Commission, and I think this was by Annette, that why shouldn't we replicate this? And I would assure you that once whatever has been shared with you, we'll still liaise with Gordon so that the same is presented to the Council of Ministers, because they have an interest in it. Because when we were launching this program, the Sustainable Water Partnership, I even do recall one of the team went and met with some ministers, and therefore they are very, they are very anxious to see what has come out of it. And given the presentation that Gordon has made, it can attract anybody, and everybody would be interested in that. And therefore, we'll take that one too for purposes of the countries knowing, getting to understand what has happened. Of course, the other factor that I need to recognize is the great support that we have received from USAID. Because even if we had these structures and we didn't get that support, I think we wouldn't have gone far. But most importantly, also to appreciate the work that was done, has been done by the team. The team led by Gordon Mumbo, of course, working with my sister Claire in Musoma, and supported by Godwin, plus of course the office led by Camacho and Christina. You have really supported this program, and to this extent, I would want to categorically say that out of most of the initiative that we have had within the Mara Basin, perhaps this one comes out very, very, very prominently, because you can see activities that were done, have been done on the ground. And I want even to attest to the fact that the presentation that Godwin has made, I think it's because of time. And I think he was economical in providing the achievement. There are so many achievements that were made, but I think because of the time he was able, and I just hope that this could be documented so that we can actually be able to use that. Of course, the other thing that I wish also to loop in and discuss is the fact that there was this discussant paper on water sharing principles. And indeed, Professor McLean mentioned about it. Water sharing principles are very, very critical. They are very, very critical at national level as well as at the regional level. And more specifically, I think at the regional level. And therefore, we tried time and again with the Godwin to convene a meeting of experts so that we could share this report, so that we have their input ownership, and then come up with a roadmap. But unfortunately, because of the impact we had of coronavirus, we were not able to do this. And therefore, I'm really passionately appealing to Sustainable through you, Camacho. I know we are good friends. We met when you started off, and we are meeting at a good. And I do recall I promised you that we are going to give this project all the support that it requires, and this can be attested by the success that Sustainable Water Partnership has made. And therefore, we are just making an appeal that if we could get some little additional time, so that I'm able to bring down this technical team to discuss in depth, analyze that document, the discussant paper, and then out of that, they could be able to give us the way forward. And also, we can also be able to share it with the countries, because if we don't bring them together, it means it dies at that level. And I think that would be a very big loss, not only to the project, not only to USAID, who has supported us greatly, but also to the people who are living within the basin. The last one, of course, is to Alison. I think it has been mentioned again and again, this was a pilot. And the basis of a pilot is to see whether something is doable. I know there is also another pilot we would also want to hear probably at another time how they have been able to perform. But in the essence, when you talk of a pilot, one would expect an upscale. And therefore, we really passionately, plead with you that under the East African community, we would wish to see this program upscaled through either your support or through any other support, but at least we should not leave it. A successful pilot should not be left to die. A pilot flies, so we have a very successful pilot, and therefore would want to see the pilot flying. So I don't think I have more to say, Camacho, but really to appreciate all the partners that have been involved in this particular program, especially your office as the head of this, the USAID, of course, in terms of supporting the whole idea, the Sustainable Water Partnership team, partners like WWF, of course, our sister in Tanzania, who was also coordinating far from there. But I believe this, you people have done us proud, and therefore, I think we really appreciate our East African community. And as I've said, this report will also be presented to our Sectoral Council of Ministers, go to the Council, and eventually it will reach to the Summit of Heads of State, so that they can do that. Things can be done differently, and they can be successful. With that, I think I wish to thank you, and thank you again, and come back to you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Matano, and I'm glad to have the support from the Lake Victoria Basin Commission throughout the program. And I know you are there for Lake Victoria. There is a permanent organization overseeing the transboundary issues, not only in the Mara but other countries too. And we thank you for that. In terms of your question about SWP, SW-Mara have concluded, but we will figure out a way of continuing some of the support to make sure that the discussion on the water sharing principles takes place and a way forward. And that's something that we will try to get. So I just thank you again. And I also wanted to mention that although programs finish and there are new programs coming. I mean, USAID is still in the region, and with different programs, all the donors are, and we are professionals, and we'll probably see each other again in the Mara. And but we will be glad to continue some of the support this year as far as we can, and then we'll keep moving forward. So with that, I would just like to conclude this webinar. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. We are already 10 minutes past 9, but I'd like to thank all the panelists and all the attendants for your continue listening to these discussions. A lot of these, the panelists mentioned, there's a lot of work that has been done, a lot of case studies. I encourage you to visit our website, swpwater.org. Some of those materials are also going to be reflected in USAID platforms such as Global Water. So with that, thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.